400 men are pretending to be 8,000. That's the entire plan, and it has exactly one flaw. If the Germans figure it out before reinforcements arrive, there is nothing. No tanks, no artillery, no real armored division standing between them and a 70-mile hole torn straight through General George Patton's Third Army. It's the third week of September 1944 in the wooded hills around Badenburg, Luxembourg, and the soldiers digging in here aren't infantry. Most of them came from art schools and advertising agencies. Their weapons today are inflatable rubber tanks, a truck full of sound effects records, and a collection of fake shoulder patches somebody sewed together the night before. They were supposed to be here 60 hours, tops. The outer limit anyone considered safe before a deception like this got noticed and punished. They end up staying almost 10 days. This is the Ghost Army, and this is the story the United States government kept classified for 51 years. To understand how 400 artists ended up holding a piece of Patton's front line with painted air, you have to go back to the unit's creation and to a British idea that a journalist named Ralph Ingersoll thought America should steal outright. By the time American planners were building toward D-Day, the British had already proven at El Alamein in North Africa 2 years earlier that a battlefield could be lied to as effectively as it could be fought on. Dummy tanks, fake supply dumps, entire phantom formations built from canvas and imagination, all designed to make an enemy commander believe an army was somewhere it wasn't. Ingersoll, working with the planning behind Operation Fortitude, the vast deception effort built to convince Hitler the real Normandy landings were a feint for a bigger invasion at Calais, pushed for the United States to build a unit of its own, one whose only weapon was persuading the enemy of something false. The result, activated in January of 1944 at Camp Forest, Tennessee, was designated the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. On paper, it was 1,100 men. In practice, it was closer to a traveling theater company, and its recruiters knew exactly what kind of actor they were looking for. They went to art schools, they went to advertising agencies, design studios, fashion houses, anywhere they might find young men who could think visually, improvise under pressure, and build a convincing lie fast, with whatever materials happened to be on hand. Among the men who answered that unusual recruitment notice were a 19-year-old named Bill Blass, who would go on to become one of the most famous fashion designers in American history, and a young painter named Ellsworth Kelly, whose post-war canvases would eventually hang in some of the most important museums in the world. They didn't know it yet, but the United States Army had just assembled possibly the most artistically talented combat unit ever fielded by any nation, and it was about to send them to the front lines armed with rubber and paint. The unit's method rested on 4 layers of deception, deliberately built to reinforce each other, so that no matter how the enemy tried to verify what they were seeing, they'd find the same lie confirmed from every angle. The visual deception was the part that photographs best, and it's the image most people recognize today without knowing the story behind it. Inflatable rubber tanks, weighing barely 90 pounds each, that 4 men could carry by hand and inflate in under 20 minutes, convincing enough from a few hundred yards and utterly convincing from the altitude a German reconnaissance aircraft would be flying. Alongside them came inflatable trucks, artillery pieces, jeeps, even fake aircraft dragged into fields and arranged with exactly the kind of imperfect, lived-in spacing a real armored division would actually leave behind. Because military units, it turns out, don't park in neat rows, and faking the mess convincingly was its own kind of specialized skill. The sonic deception belonged to a separate company entirely, 145 men whose entire job was sound. Engineers from Bell Labs had helped design a system that could play pre-recorded battlefield audio. The specific mechanical clatter of tank treads, the layered noise of trucks idling, men talking, equipment being unloaded through massive speakers mounted on half-tracks, audible from as far as 15 miles away on a quiet night. The recordings weren't generic. They were built and mixed like film scores, engineered to match the exact unit being impersonated, played at the volume and rhythm that unit's real movements would actually produce. The radio deception, run by nearly 300 men who had once been an ordinary signal company, might have been the most technically demanding piece of the entire operation. Skilled operators didn't just send fake messages. They learned to imitate the individual fist, the personal rhythm and cadence of specific real radio operators from the units they were impersonating, so that any German listening post that had learned to recognize a particular operator's Morse code style would hear exactly what they expected to hear, transmitted by a man who had never actually touched that unit's real equipment. And then there was atmosphere, the hardest deception to fake and the easiest to get wrong. Soldiers were sent into local cafes and villages with a memorized history of the division they were impersonating, under instructions to talk about it just enough, in just the right offhand way, that anyone listening, and someone was almost always listening, would overhear a story that matched everything the visual, sonic, and radio deceptions were already selling. Shoulder patches were repainted onto vehicles overnight. Cooking fires were lit at dawn in patterns meant to suggest breakfast for 8,000 men instead of 400. Water trucks made repeated trips to a town's water point, hauling far more than 400 men could ever need, because 8,000 men would have needed exactly that much. The unit's first opportunity to run all four deceptions together as a single coordinated operation came in August of 1944, outside the besieged port city of Brest, in Operation Brest, a proving ground, and one of the rare times the Ghost Army found itself operating close enough to a real, ongoing battle that the line between performance and combat blurred uncomfortably thin. It worked well enough to convince higher command the unit was ready for something far riskier. That something arrived in mid-September in the woods above Bettembourg. Patton's Third Army had raced across France faster than almost anyone anticipated, and by mid-September it had stalled at the Moselle River, gathering its strength for an assault on the fortress city of Metz. Throwing two divisions at Metz from the south meant pulling troops away from the northern flank, and that left a gap in the line that stretched, by some estimates, nearly 70 miles, guarded by little more than a single cavalry squadron. If German armor found that gap and drove through it, it could unravel Patton's entire position. Patton himself, in a note written that same week, acknowledged the problem in characteristically understated terms. "There is one rather bad spot in my line, but I don't think the Huns know it. By tomorrow night I will have it plugged." The plug was 400 men from the 23rd, ordered to impersonate the entire 8,000-man 6th Armored Division. They moved fast. Within a single day of getting the order, the unit was in position in the wooded hills around Bettembourg, running every layer of deception simultaneously. 10 separate radio nets went active, cross-talking with real units on their flanks to reinforce the illusion from every direction a listener might check. Vehicles got repainted overnight with 6th Armored markings. A factory section inside the unit churned out fake divisional shoulder patches fast enough to sew onto uniforms before dawn. Cooking fires went up on schedule. Soldiers wandered into the newly liberated town of Esch-sur-Alzette, liberated only 5 days earlier. Its streets still lined with civilians cheering every American convoy that passed, with absolutely no idea what was actually hidden inside those canvas-covered trucks, and let themselves be overheard in cafes, talking about a division most of them had only just memorized the history of that same morning. The plan called for this to last 60 hours. That was the outer edge of what deception planners considered survivable. Long enough to matter, short enough that the illusion wouldn't be tested past its breaking point by German reconnaissance patient enough to notice inconsistencies. The real 6th Armored Division, the one meant to actually fill this gap for good, was delayed. The Ghost Army held the position for nearly 10 days. Every hour past that 60-hour mark was borrowed time, spent under the constant possibility that a German patrol would get close enough to notice the tanks didn't leave tread marks, or that a curious local would mention the wrong detail to the wrong person, or that an artillery probe testing the line's actual strength would reveal, within minutes, that this armored division had nothing behind its rubber tanks but 400 exhausted artists running on nerve and improvisation. It didn't happen. The illusion held until the real 6th Armored finally arrived, and the 23rd quietly pulled out, having spent the better part of 2 weeks convincing an entire German sector that Patton's flank was covered by 20 times the actual number of men holding it. Patton's forces took Metz that November. The Ghost Army's own operations officer, looking back on Bettemborg specifically, called it the moment the unit finally executed a mission, fully professionally and correctly. The operation where a still young, still improvising outfit proved the entire concept actually worked under real pressure, not just on a training ground. It wasn't the last time. Over the following months, the 23rd staged more than 20 separate battlefield deceptions across France, Luxembourg, Belgium, and Germany, faking river crossings, phantom divisional headquarters, and troop concentrations that existed nowhere except in the recordings playing from a half-track speakers and the radio traffic crackling across a frequency. No German cryptographer ever quite learned to distrust. Its most successful single operation came in March of 1945, near the very end of the war. Operation Viersen, a deception along the Rhine River, convincing German command that the Allied crossing would come far north of where it actually did, drawing attention and defensive strength away from the real assault and helping keep Allied casualties in that crossing dramatically lower than they might otherwise have been. None of it was free. 3 men of the Ghost Army were killed in action carrying out these missions, and dozens more were wounded casualties that arrived with a particular cruelty in a unit whose entire purpose was supposed to be avoiding real combat, doing the job with paint and speakers instead of rifles, and finding out that proximity to the front line doesn't care what your weapon actually is. When the war ended, so, officially, did the story. The unit's operational history was classified and stayed that way. Men who had spent 1.5 years running some of the most audacious deception operations of the entire European campaign went home to civilian life and simply couldn't talk about any of it, not to their wives, not to their children, not to old army buddies who'd served in units with less to hide. Asked what they did in the war, they learned to give vague, unsatisfying answers and change the subject, year after year, decade after decade, while the actual record of what they'd accomplished sat sealed in a government archive. Nobody outside, a small circle of officials, was allowed to open. It stayed that way for 51 years. The records were finally declassified in 1996. By then, many of the original 1,100 men had already died, taking the full detail of their own stories with them. The men who were still alive were in their 70s and 80s, and for the first time in half a century, they were able to sit down with the families who had wondered for decades what exactly Dad had done in the war, and tell them the truth, that he'd spent a year in Europe pretending, with astonishing skill and no small amount of courage, to be somebody else's army. A U.S. Army analyst who studied the unit's file after it finally came to light put the assessment in terms that read almost like an understatement, given what the record actually showed. Rarely, if ever, has there been a group of such a few men which had so great an influence on the outcome of a major military campaign. Later estimates would credit the Ghost Army's operations with saving somewhere between 15 and 30,000 American lives across the course of the war. Soldiers who never had to fight battles that the enemy's own confusion, engineered entirely by 400 artists and a truckload of rubber tanks, had already quietly prevented from happening in the first place. Recognition, when it finally came slowly and late, the way it tends to, for units built around secrecy instead of medals. A Smithsonian feature in 1985 offered the first public glimpse. A PBS documentary in 2013 brought the story to a wider audience for the first time. And in 2022, Congress voted to award the unit's surviving members and their families the Congressional Gold Medal, one of the highest civilian honors the United States government can bestow. A ceremony finally held in March of 2024, 79 years after the guns in Europe went quiet, honoring men who had spent most of their own lives unable to tell anyone what the medal was actually for. There is a particular kind of irony sitting at the center of this story that's worth sitting with for a moment. An armored division wins by being seen, by projecting exactly the kind of overwhelming, undeniable force that makes an enemy commander reconsider his options before the shooting even starts. The Ghost Army won by being seen and not existing at all. An entire imaginary division built convincingly enough that German intelligence apparently nicknamed the real 6th Armored Division the Phantom Division, never quite certain, even afterward, which version of it they'd actually been fighting against in Lorraine that September. 400 artists held open a 70-mile gap in George Patton's front line for nearly 10 days, using nothing but rubber, sound, radio, static, and the simple, disciplined nerve to keep performing a lie convincingly enough that nobody on the other side of it ever called their bluff. This is the Ghost Army, the unit that won battles by making sure nobody ever really knew it was there.